Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. And welcome to this very special video. Interesting title to the video, isn't it? But it's not my title, it's the Hollywood Reporter's article about the Joker movie. I need to remind myself of this title actually, so let's read it to you. In defense of Joker and its repulsive violence. Now, guess who shared this on Twitter? Diane Nelson, of all people, the former executive over at DC, the DC section of Warner Brothers. And of course, she left, but of course, she was removed after the fallout to Justice League. And she was one of the big leads working alongside Jeff Johns in running the DCEU at the time, and she was removed very quickly. But I'm not here to talk about Diane. I'm here to talk about this article. Now, after I read this article, I'm going to give you my thoughts, because I think this is very, very important that I lay this down for you. So when you hear people rubbishing this movie and it offends you, and and we know this is just an angle, because I want to talk about that very deeply, because I know what's going on here. But let's be clear. The more they try and tarnish this film, the more green that will land at Warner Brothers' doors and the more pats on the head Walter Hamada will get. So let's give this a read. Todd Phillips, a bravura of whatever that says work, dares to confront the things we're most afraid to see. In 1971, Warner Brothers released one of the most controversial films in movie history, A Clockwork Orange. Told the dystopian story of a brutal young man, Alex DeLarge, Malcolm McDowell, who needs a band of thugs, droogs, on a terrifying crime spree, beating, raping and committing acts of what's called ultra-violence along the way. At one point, he bludgeons a woman with a phallic sculpture at another, and his droogs bash a man and rape his wife while chanting, singing in the rain. Stanley Kubrick's film drew an immediate outcry despite its box office success. Pauline Kael called it pornographic because she argued it dehumanized the suffering of Alex's victims while eliciting sympathy for Alex's own. The Catholic Church forbade its members from seeing the picture, which was given an X rating in North America. The Catholic Church, with all they're guilty of. Interesting, right? We won't go into that. Another video maybe on another channel. But what made Clockwork Orange especially troubling was the spate of copycat incidents that followed, or at least incidents that looked as if they'd been shaped by the film. Of course, they weren't shaped by the film, but never mind. In early 1972, a British prosecutor slammed it for influencing a 14-year-old accused of manslaughter. Later, a 16-year-old pleading guilty to killing an old man said he'd heard about the movie, didn't watch it. While his attorney assured the court that the link between this crime and the sensational literature, particularly A Clockwork Orange, is established beyond reasonable doubt. There, of course, is the rub. No study has ever established that link beyond a reasonable doubt, nor is there any evidence to show that a criminal, even one who imitates something on film, wouldn't have done something equally abominable at another time. Kubrick knew this. Still shaken, he asked Warners to withdraw his picture from theatres while defending it with the argument that to try and fasten any responsibility on art as the cause of life seems to me to put the case the wrong way around. Art consists of reshaping life, but it does not create life nor cause life. Now, almost half a century later, the studio that released Clockwork Orange is back with another release that's likely to draw a similar backlash. Bring it on, more money for Warner Brothers. The picture is Joker, Todd Phillips' origin story of the character who will eventually become Batman's nemesis. But unlike other Batman films, not to mention a fleet of superhero movies that traffic in violence while hiding behind the notion that their brand of violence cannot be taken seriously, there's nothing comic book about it. Joker's great strength is precisely that. It lays down a gauntlet before the genre that's dominated Hollywood for the past 2 decades. The superhero movie entering its own terms, as if to say enough. It's time to see violence for what it is. It deals with the real rather than the unreal, the believable rather than the unbelievable, the probable rather than the impossible. And it does so with extraordinary daring, limiting its plot to the most basic elements in order to focus on a character richer, scarier, and more upsetting than any we've seen in the superhero world. If Joker owes much to Scorsese's Taxi Driver 1976 and The King of Comedy 1982, by paying them homage, it also reminds us how far studio filmmaking has fallen since those glorious risk-taking days. Well done, whoever wrote this article. Yes, let me repeat what this person has said. It also reminds us how far studio filmmaking has fallen since those glorious risk-taking days. It has, and the domination of Disney has made that situation even worse. The domination of Disney is bad for this beautiful industry, this once beautiful industry. Anyway, few have seen Joker question its director's skill or of its sensational lead, Joaquin Phoenix, but many are understandably concerned by the film's violence. Two scenes in particular are exceptionally troubling. In one, Arthur Fleck, Phoenix suddenly shoots a colleague at point-blank range, the realism drawing gasps from the audience. In another, riots break out as crowds egg themselves on in support of this psychopath. These sequences, critics argue, cross an undefined and perhaps unidentifiable line. God, my reading's really, really bad, isn't it? Anyway, every original film has had to grapple with where the line lies. When Scorsese and his screenwriter Paul Schrader made Taxi Driver, they at first imagined that all Robert De Niro's victims would be black, only to reject the idea as too inflammatory. Other filmmakers have had to confront the most horrible fallout for releases that weren't even intended to provoke. A previous Batman film, The Dark Knight Rises, was dealt a terrible blow when a gunman, James Holmes, 24, entered a Colorado Cineplex with grenades, a rifle and guns, killing 12 people and injuring 70 more. At the time, there was one of the worst mass murders in American history. Since then, we've faced a barrage more. Holmes, of course, became famous for his dyed red hair, for purportedly calling himself the Joker. Many question whether that was true, which makes the possible consequences of today's Joker all the more alarming. So was Warner Brothers right to make it? I'm going to say yes. And the article writer says yes, because art has enormous beneficial impact on society. Even when it skirts the risk of doing harm, it makes us question, reconsider, reevaluate. It shakes us as much as it succors us, makes us uncomfortable as much as it makes us comfortable. It sinks deep in our hearts and minds and changes us forever. And the more unsettling it is, the more likely it is to have an effect. Just like Clockwork Orange, now widely hailed as a masterpiece. Joker has the power to do this and more because it's razor sharp in its morality. The film's hero is a psychopath, psychologically warped, misinterpreting everything he sees, and of that we're never in doubt. Only a crazy person would want to emulate this guy. The kind of crazy person who doesn't need Joker to trick him into action. That's true. I'm horrified by the endless violence in today's movies, and I'm even more horrified by how violence is celebrated rather than condemned. But Joker does the opposite. It sickens us, it nauseates us, it repulses us at our very core. It rejects the cartoon world we've inhabited for so long and says, wake up, violence is real, and it's deadly, and it's here. The final part was kind of interesting. The final part I'm talking about, he says or she says, actually, who wrote this? Let's have a look who wrote this, right? In defense of the Joker, where are we? It doesn't really say. But anyway, right, let's talk about this. So the final part of that article, the person says, I'm horrified by the violence in films today. The violence in films today. The violence in films today isn't even that bad. I mean, he's talking about Taxi Driver. He's talking about A Clockwork Orange. Those films, as he said himself, are ultra-violent. But this is where we are. You see, let me talk about this as well. Is it plausible that someone sees something on television or on the cinema screen and copies it? Yes, because I've done it. When I saw Superman, I wanted to fly. I wanted to be Superman. When I saw TJ Hooker throw his baton on someone's legs and he fell over, I grabbed the stick at school while I was chasing him and chucked it on their legs and I bruised their legs. We do copy things we see on TV and film. It's undeniable. We can't pretend. And that is true. So, is it irresponsible, and remember I've seen this film, for Warner Brothers and Todd Phillips to go so hardcore in this film? No, because the Hollywood Reporter article person who wrote this article makes a great point. Even if they're not triggered by Joker, they will do something else. They're going to do it anyway. A film doesn't create a maniac. It just kind of gives them an idea how to be a maniac. So that's really an interesting concept to me. But, of course, we are part of a generation now where they're all pampered. They wear ice so they don't get too warm. They wear pads. Their mummies wipe their brows for them. They're not very independent people, and they're very shocked and horrified by everything they see. So for the past 10 years, they've been watching the MCU, which is very cartoony, which is very disingenuous. It's just basically children's film. Basically, it's children's film for adults and children. There's no consequences to it. There's no hardcore. There's no deep underlining tones or themes. But Joker movie, as this article says, it takes violence and it makes it look as ugly. And it makes you absolutely see that Arthur Fleck is seeing things, he's seeing a perspective that isn't there because the guy has mental health problems. And from the moment he can't get hold of his meds, this guy has tried his hardest to fit into society. And society fails him. And then his mental state, because of the failure of society to provide him with his pills, right? And this is the problem. This is what happens. This is how it kicks off. So, it shows you that. And it shows you that violence is bad. And let me explain something to you. I'd rather be from my generation who saw really hardcore violent films. And it showed you how devastating. When I saw Goodfellas, right, in Casino, and you see the blood coming out, the brain splattering out, I was horrified and felt uncomfortable. And that's a good thing. You should feel uncomfortable. It's when you get a boner or you're turned on by it, you should worry about yourself and go and talk to someone. And that's what I see. So there's going to be a lot of offended people. And I've said this before. We understand that many people in critical media now, and I've said his name before, Scott Mendelsohn and his crew, are gunning for Warner Brothers. They do not like Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers is the only entity standing in Disney's way of studio domination. They wanted to buy Warner Brothers. They wanted to buy Netflix. They failed on both counts. They went to buy 20th Century Fox and lost Sky B. Yes, they wanted that as well. And Comcast pulled their pants down by their ankles. And I absolutely love it because I don't like Disney. I watch some of their content. Yes, I like being entertained. But they are a problem. And their greed has already cost them Spider-Man. Another conversation, which we've already had on this channel, of course, in a specific video. So, Joker movie is the movie that says to our SJWs, we've had enough kneeling down to you. We've had enough making films for you because you don't watch films. You talk about them, you do think pieces, you do videos about them, but SJWs don't watch entertainment. They do not watch films. They do not watch television. They watch them so they can write about them, but they don't love them. It's not passionate. I set this channel up because I love movies. I love TV. I love DC films. I love talking about all films, right? Predominantly, I talk about DC films. Of course I do. That's my biggest passion right now. But as a younger man, I grew up watching films like JFK, one of the greatest films I've ever seen, in my top 10, as is Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July. We grew up with real films, with real violence, with hardcore issues and themes. But this generation have not. They are growing up with the MCU. So they're pampered, they're protected from the darker side of life. It's like watching the episode of Last Man Standing when they want to baby-proof the whole house, just in case the kid has any kind of accident, and that doesn't work in life. You want to protect your children. You want to protect this generation growing up, but you can't. They have to learn. They have to learn what the world is, and this is what Joker movie presents. This is what Casino. This is what the Godfather films, A Clockwork Orange, Taxi Driver, The Shining. These films opened our eyes as young people. And in a way, JFK opened my eyes, because I was taught at school that Lee Harvey Oswald killed the president alone. But we found that JFK, whether you believe what Stone says or not, and I do, because it was common sense, one bullet didn't jag out of two people, did it? It's ridiculous. But so films can teach us so much. And hardcore films like The Joker, can teach us so much that violence is ugly. Violence has consequences, right? A character like Arthur Fleck, who is kind of waved off by society. Mental health, what's that? We're not going to help you. We ain't got the money. We've got more important things to spend it on. Do you understand what this film's trying to say? So for critics out there who are ready to go for the movie, and I'm sure they're waiting for a tragedy so they can jump on that and blame the film. This film is not going to be withdrawn. This film is going to be in your cinemas around the world for 5 or 6 weeks. This film could potentially make $1 billion. And the more these politically motivated agenda pieces come out, and I'm not talking about the Hollywood Reporter. I think the Hollywood Reporter will come out to do a kind of spin piece for Warner Brothers. This is what happens. They're affiliated with Warner Brothers a lot. And they do defend the big studios. That's the part of the game. Now, whether you want to believe this article and say, actually, they've got a point. Yes, violence can be copied from films and media. We know it can. We know. We can't deny that. But at the end of the day, we can't stop creating art because people out there are going to see it and maybe want to copy and shadow it. We can't. This film is very important because it says to the SJWs, it says to SJW critics who have got an agenda, who want to change the world, who want to change the world in the wrong way. We are going to be making these films from now on. Get used to it. We're not listening to you anymore. We want to compel and move our audiences like we used to. That's what Warner Brothers was. And as the article said, movie making now has fallen so badly, where we're seeing so many average films. And Joker movie is a statement from Warner Brothers, from Walter Hamada, from Ann Sarnoff, and soon from J.J. Abrams, who will come into his position at Warner Brothers very, very quickly, that this is a studio that wants to make real movies. We want to make movies for kids. We want to make films like you see in the MCU and stuff like that, but we also want to see hard R films. That is the future. And this is why Warner Brothers are going to be the leader of films again. Because all of a sudden, people are going to say, it's just another Disney film. Oh my God, Warner Brothers are making this really, really interesting picture. I'm definitely going to go and see that. The more generic Disney become, and the more interesting and variable and artistic Warner Brothers become, this is how you defeat Disney. And this is how Warner Brothers will defeat Disney.